Chapter 4. The Knights of the Road. Marcel reported to the courtyard, half ready and half asleep as his bare feet hit the courtyard tile with a chill. The world was gray and teeming with stars, and the floor might as well have been squares of ice. He set down a sack of the few small things he owned, along with a travel cape, his bow, and a quiver of arrows. He kneeled down and stuffed his toes into thick wool socks, and slipped on a pair of deer-hide shoes. Amber lights flickered above. Marcel stood to attention as two soldiers marched down from the upper level, bearing torches in one hand and René's belongings in the other. Looking cross and impatient, they lugged out his sea chest, along with bundles of weaponry and the like. René himself followed next, draped in a heavy cloak with a sword strapped to his belt. At his side was a soldier more sour-faced than all the others.
Captain Ribault hasn't taken lightly this threat of attack. He's adamant we leave France sooner rather than later, well before this Bayard fellow has a chance to rear his ugly head.
The sour-faced man spoke with a painful rasp, no doubt the result of shouting orders at the top of his lungs for countless years. He was a short, bulky man with a frizzy blonde beard. He bounced himself along in a stride that was as wide and menacing as his stubby legs could put forth. His body weight was mostly muscle. He resembled less a man and more a cannonball with a hairy face.
I'm under strict orders to get us all safely aboard La Trinity within the hour. Ribault sails at dawn.
And if we run into trouble, Sergeant, what then?
Then, said the sour-faced man, Bayard will have me to deal with, and God help him.
With his things all packed and ready to go, Marcel threw on his travel cape, approached the men, and saluted. Bonjour, messieurs. Well, Marcel, said René, I had hoped for one more day to finish up business around here, but if you're ready, then I'm ready. Shall we? Oui, monsieur, the boy replied. Ahem. The sergeant furrowed his brow, first at Marcel, and then at René. Oh, that's right. René put a firm grip to the boy's shoulder. I forgot to tell you, you mustn't call me monsieur anymore. From now on, it's Commander. Oui, Commander.
You'll get the hang of things,
said the sergeant in a rough-around-the-edges, but friendly kind of way.
You must be the Marcel who helped warn us of the attack. Well, glad to have you with us.
He hastily shook the boy's hand, without so much as sparing him a second to reply.
But I'm afraid we can't waste any more time talking out here in the cold. The world will be waking up soon, and we must be gone before it has.
But not before my boys have had their breakfast, said a harsh, womanly voice storming out the kitchen door. The sergeant took a step back.
And just who are you, mademoiselle?
That would be my cook, said René, with a chuckle beneath his breath. Here, said Babette. It's not much, but it'll keep you warm. She handed out some reheated bread tied in cloth, a quarter wheel of cheese, and 2 hot ales mixed with honey. As Marcel slurped a foamy drizzle running down the length of his mug, Babette pulled something unexpected from the folds of her apron. A gift! It was a blue wool beanie, knitted by her own 2 hands. She slid the cap down over the boy's head, tucking in his curls and folding in his ears, and then she gave his forehead a tender kiss as the new wool met the love on her lips. Marcel touched the coziness about his head with a glimmer in his eyes. It just might have been the nicest gift anyone had ever made him. Merci, Babette. Well, the sight of the boy in the blue beanie was enough for her to trickle a tear or two, which was also enough to irritate her. So Babette stomped back to her kitchen without so much as a second look, grumbling to herself and swatting her hands in the air. Marcel merely shook his head and smiled. He knew it was just her way of saying, "You're welcome." Marcel hurried off to catch up with the men. Outside, hooves clacked upon the street pebbles. The sergeant and another man had taken to their mounts, and through a snorting of hot horse breath, the boy found René waving at him from the back of an open cart. Marcel hopped in, lumping himself together with René and the rest of the gear. With a swish of the reins, the convoy was off, 2 riders at the front, one being the sergeant, and the cart following closely behind. Marcel didn't much mind being driven around like a piece of cargo. It was good fun, actually, but he wondered if René had expected something a little more, well, comfortable. The cart was bare bones, military in style, and made of raw, unsanded wood. Its only amenity was a lantern hooked to one side, shedding light on a small branding in the wood grain, the crest of Admiral Collini. But René proved indifferent as he sat huddled there among the luggage, drinking his ale the same way he did everything, casually and without any concern if it was good or not. The boy, on the other hand, as with all food and drink, couldn't guzzle down the hot foaming liquid fast enough. Even as the mug's handle burned the very tips of his fingers, Marcel blew off the whirls of steam for another gulp, and watched in awe as the little trails of heat from his mug bloomed into a whole cloud, enveloping the road in a thick blanket of gray. But it was no cloud from his mug's steam after all. It was a heavy fog that had swallowed up the path, and the farther the cart went down the road, the less Marcel could see much of anything through its gray world. The boy tensed his muscles as a dark shape reached out from the fog. Maybe it was Bayard or one of the knights of the road. But no, it was just a low-lying tree branch, passing overhead as the cart drifted by. "Commander," asked Marcel, "is it going to be like this all the time?" "Like what all the time?" "You know," said the boy. "With enemies out to get us." "For a lot of Huguenots," said René, "it's been like that from the very beginning. Persecuted for what they believe, their lives in danger. It's become a way of life for some to always be looking over their shoulder." "Guess, being a Catholic in France, I never knew what that was like." Marcel pulled his knees close to his chest and buried his chin between the knobs. "Until just now." "You're getting a taste of something many have been feeling for a long time," said René. "But it's nothing to be scared of. Make no mistake, Marcel, we're not running away from Bayard and his thugs because we're scared of a fight, but because we want to choose when we fight and the ground we fight it on. And that's why we have to get to Florida, to find that ground, once and for all." "The more I think about it, about a fight," said Marcel, "the more scared I get." "Since when are you afraid of locking antlers with anybody? You've certainly been at it enough, neck to neck and toe to toe with those other boys in the street." "Oui," said Marcel, "but it's not like I was going to kill any of them." "Oh, is that what this is all about?" René nodded. "You're afraid to take a life." "It's just," said Marcel, "it's a sin, and—" "It's not a sin to kill," said René. "It's a sin to murder." "But what's the difference?" René didn't answer right away. He paused to think about it, then said, "Trust Holy Spirit to show you the difference. When your life is at risk, and you've asked Him to show you, He will. And you may just find, more often than not, there's a way to defeat your enemy without killing him. But you already know that from your fights in the street." He sent a friendly wallop to the boy's upper arm. "Hey!" Marcel grinned, rubbing the spot. He leaned over to send a playful punch back to René, but as he did, darts zipped past his ear. Swoop! Swoop! Would have stuck him between the eyes, too, had he not just moved. A horrible sound came next, as the cart ran over something strange. Crushed metal beneath the wheels was its noise, yet a smooth boulder was its bump. It lifted René and the boy up from their seats, and smashed them back down to the cart as it passed under. Marcel jolted to the tailgate, but found no clues in the fog. "What was that?" René pointed a finger up front. "Our driver." The boy's eyes nearly leaped from his face as he looked at the empty seat in horror. What happened to him?" "I'm no genius, Marcel." René scrambled up to the driver's seat and took hold of the reins. "But I think someone shot him. He fell, and now he's got himself run over. We best find the sergeant before the same happens to us." They called out to the fog together, "Sergeant! Sergeant!" But there was no answer, nor any sign of him or the other rider at all. "We may have to assume we're on our own," said René. "So keep your head down and your eyes open. You see anything, let me know. Hi-ya!" The horse picked up the pace. "And Marcel," he turned with a pale, sweaty look, "you may want to get your bow ready, just in case." Marcel shared the same look. He huffed a deep breath, untied his things, and began to string his bow. The cart was jiggling over the uneven road, and it wasn't easy lying down with a foot to the bowstring, while he worked the loops up to their notches. But finally, the thing was done. With an uneasy frown, he gave the tightened string a yank. It might have looked ready, but a good hunter like Marcel knew a freshly strung bow needed at least a couple of shots to settle the tension. There'd be no accuracy until it had. But oh well, it'd have to do. There was no time as the sound of hooves pounded across the cobblestones, closer and closer from the veil of fog behind. "Somebody's coming!" "Think it's one of ours?" I don't know," said Marcel. "But whoever it is, they're coming up quick." Marcel ducked behind the tailgate as a crossbow dart hit the wood with a deadly thunk. Its spiky point jutted out the other side, just nicking Marcel on the throat. The boy cowered back and felt around his Adam's apple. He was fine, but his breath had escaped him. René spun a hand back and grabbed him by the underarm. "You all right?" The boy nodded, catching his breath. "I don't understand. I can't see anything, but somebody can see us." "The light!" René nodded his chin toward the lantern. "Get rid of the light!" Marcel unhooked the lantern, letting it drop to the road in a burst of glass, flame, and iron. As the broken lantern trailed out of view, its blaze revealed the shape of 4 hooves galloping toward them. "There! I see 'em!" "You gotta try to shoot back, Marcel, and make it count. I'll try to drive us as steady as I can." Marcel slung an arrow to his bow and pulled back the string. He aimed for wherever a rider might be, there in the fog where he had seen the horse. But his fingers were not willing to let loose. Whoosh! Another crossbow dart zoomed by, this time closer to René. "Remember," he called back, "trust Holy Spirit." Trust Holy Spirit. The boy repeated the words as if it were a prayer. He steadied his aim right into the dark gray void where the last dart had come from. Trust Holy Spirit. It was as if time slowed as a powerful snort flared from the nostrils of the horse. Its breath melted through the fog, splitting the veil. The opening revealed the eyes, the leather bridle, and the ears. The broad muscles of the shoulders came into view next, followed by the wild flowing hair of the crest, which danced before the rider, a knight of the road. He was cloaked in a green hood, from which a tattered cape trailed in the wind as if wings of terror sprung from his neck. His gloved hands, missing a finger covering or two, loaded up another dart into his crossbow. Marcel searched the rogue up and down, and he knew what he had to do. His arrow spewed forth, wildly out of control. Without hesitation, he whipped out another, but it flew off too, well out of aim. Yet it had pulled closer to the target that time. The tension in the string was settling. Marcel guessed he had time for about one more shot until the adversary could return fire. There'd be no other chance, as a dart to the boy's flesh would surely be his end, easier than a fork sticking into a tender cut of meat. The rogue held his crossbow at the ready as Marcel slung up what would be his third arrow. The boy picked his target, but this time he wouldn't aim directly at the rider. No, this time he would work with the settling tension to curve it into place. His heart raced until he could hear its thumps all the way in the hollows of his head. Holy Spirit, help me. Marcel was filled with fresh control. From somewhere, a new confidence overcame him, which seemed to rise up from his toes. His arms and spine were showered with goosebumps, and a warm peace spread over his head. It was Holy Spirit. The boy fired. The arrow flew out. Its path was strong, but almost too wide. Just as Marcel thought it was going to be a miss, it stuck right into where he had aimed it for, right in the corner of flesh where the shoulder met the chest. A survivable wound. The rogue writhed over in pain as the crossbow fell from his hands. He would live, but as his horse slowed, that was the last Marcel saw of him, and would see again. With the help of Holy Spirit, Marcel had defeated his enemy, and had also spared the rogue's life. The moment of victory vanished as 2 more riders emerged from the fog. This time, they weren't coming up from behind, but were closing in from either side of the cart. René steered to swerve, trying to run the riders off the road, but all it did was throw Marcel and the luggage about until he was well pinned beneath the commander's sea chest. The cobblestone street echoed with the clinking of hooves, 12 horseshoes in all between the 3 horses. The silver buckles of their harnesses rang out as bells, overshadowed only by a loud shink. It was a sword, rising from its sheath as its blade caught a glint of moonlight. And none other than Bayard himself was its bearer. But he did not descend the blade upon René's head, nor did he look to helpless Marcel beneath the sea chest. He swiped and hacked at the leather straps and bits of wood that bridged horse to cart. He was going to set the horse free and leave the cart to crash all by itself. René pulled out a pistol to stop him. 1 shot, and that was all he'd have. There'd be no time to reload. Whoop-bap! The bullet went to waste as his aim went to ruin. The second rider had taken hold of his arm from the other side. With his free hand, René unsheathed his own sword as the brute let loose to do the same. The clash of their swords sang out through the cold, cloudy air, and René stood up on the driver's seat and began to fend off the 2 villains from either side. But it wasn't enough to stop Bayard's scheme as he finally cut the horse free from the cart. And surely it wasn't René's plan to leave Marcel behind, but as the cart pulled back from the horse, he jumped to its back at the last second, and off he went into the gray mist, sparring on horseback with Bayard and the other rider. Marcel was alone, stuck beneath a piece of toppled luggage on a runaway cart. He only managed to push out from the sea chest thanks to a bump in the road that helped him flip it off. Now free, he looked over the side of the cart and searched for a soft place to bail out and roll. But there was nothing but sharp rocks and knotty roots. Not so much as a patch of grass, anywhere. He was out of time. Violently, out of control and headed off-road, the wheels smacked onto a pebbled way leading up to an old windmill. Marcel braced for impact. Wood and wheel crashed into 1,000 pieces into the windmill's stack as the boy catapulted through the air and flung through an opening in the wall. He landed headfirst into a mound of hay inside, where a milk cow, now very disturbed, groaned at the boy's intrusion. Marcel stumbled to his feet. Lengths of hay were stuck into the wool of his blue beanie and cape. He patted himself down, making sure his body was all still there. Well, nothing was broken anyway. He was a little dizzy, but all right. He tipped his head to the cow. "Pardon me, mademoiselle." Marcel wandered out of the mill, this time using the door, and as he brushed himself off, his heart dropped to his stomach. There in the pebbled yard was Bayard. The hooves of his horse crunched over the gravel as the rogue pulled back his hood and swung his sword through the chilled air. He smiled with every oily crease his ugly face could put on. The boy was cornered. He could run left, or he could run right, but the rogue would quickly overtake him either way. No, there was only one way out of this one, and that was to go back into the windmill and go up. Just what exactly he'd do when he got to the top, he hadn't figured that part out yet, but away he went. Marcel barred the door with a latch on the inside, but that didn't stop Bayard from riding up to the opening in the wall and pouncing through the window. The boy led the chase up the rickety stairs, higher and higher, with Bayard not far behind, until at last there came a wooden door at the top. It was a swollen door, though wedged into the door frame and not easy to open. "Come on, come on!" He pried the stubborn door open, but it was all the time Bayard needed to catch up with the boy. The door burst open, and the pair tripped through it together onto an upper catwalk behind the twirling of the windmill blades. Marcel leaped off into a descending blade and held on tight. He yelled out for dear life as the great blade took him under, then up, over, then around, and, "Oh no! Back to Bayard!" The scoundrel yanked the boy out the mill blade and threw him down on the wood of the catwalk. The floor was all too slippery, and Marcel hadn't the bare feet to help skid to a stop. His deer-hide shoes failed him as he slid off the side of the platform, only latching onto the edge at the last second. His knuckles turned white as his fingertips bloomed pink. His legs flailed helplessly over a height that would surely cripple him if not kill him. With every muscle he had, he pulled himself up. First, a desperate elbow and a knee, until Bayard pulled him up the rest of the way and locked the boy into a hold. "Let go of me!" With no weapons but his own 2 elbows, Marcel stirred up into a rage, and twisted against the man's hold, that is, until a sword at his throat bid him otherwise. "Careful," said Bayard. "Now hold still and listen. I don't want to kill you. Tell your sword that." Marcel struggled to pull away as the sharp edge of the blade dug a thin cut into his chin. "I'm going to give you this one chance, Marcel, for old time's sake. Come back to the woods with me, back to where you belong." "What's it to you what I do with my life? You don't care about me." "I cared about your father," said Bayard. "And I care about what he wanted for you. Don't you?" "Maybe I would if I actually knew, but I don't. All I ever known were the things you said about him. But you don't really know what he would have wanted. You don't know anything about me, not even my own mother." "I know she named you Marcel before she died, but maybe you're right. Maybe I don't know much when it comes to your parents, or what they would have wanted. But I've seen enough of you to tell what you're meant to be. You've got a way with the bow, and everything else it takes to be a knight of the road. And one day soon, you could be putting up your skills for gold and living free like the rest of us." "I'm already free, Bayard." "Being alone isn't the same as being free, Marcel." Bayard grabbed the boy by the jaw and shoved his gaze into his own. "You're not free. You're just an orphan." "But," Marcel shimmered with the beginning of tears. "But I'm not alone. Oh, you mean those heretics?" Bayard cackled right into the boy's face. The stench of his jeering breath nearly sent the boy to vomit. "They're not your friends, Marcel. They probably just feel sorry for you. You're nothing more than a stray pup in their eyes. But things will be different if you come back with me to my camp. I promise you, you won't get kicked around like before. Never meant anything by it, you know. Was just seeing what you were made of was all." "You and your man had me black and blue," said Marcel. "All for stupid stuff like burning a pot of soup or spilling a bucket of water. If I had known those beatings were going to send you running off, we never would have hit you in the first place. But you'll be a real son to me this time, and a brother among many, and we'll show you how to be a man." Marcel sniffed up a helping of snot, and as a ray of light through a dark cloud, the helpless boy remembered Captain Ribault's words back in the courtyard, about being well on his way to becoming a man, and how a man gets to choose his own way. Marcel puffed up his chest. "I don't need your help to become a man." "So be it," Bayard said. Marcel held fast, ready to face whatever came next. But the only thing that came was the sound of hooves upon the pebbled way below. It was the sergeant. "Up here!" Marcel shouted, only to get a mouthful of Bayard's glove in return. He bit down hard on the forefinger, but it was little use against the thick leather. "Oomph!" Below, the sergeant flicked at the reins and pounded closer. There was a fresh scowl on his fuzzy blond brow, now beaded with sweat. The high legs of his horse soared across the gravel and came to a halt. And from the saddle, the sergeant swung up the new weapon of Europe, the arquebus, a firepower to mark the end of the medieval world and usher in the dawn of the gun. "Put down your sword," shouted the sergeant's raspy voice, "and set the boy free." He took aim, the firearm snug into his shoulder, his finger at the ready, and the match tube lit and fuming with smoke. "Fire upon me if you dare," said Bayard. The cold edge of his steel creeped closer to Marcel's throat. "But if you kill me, the boy's coming with me. So give us the road if you wish him to live." The sergeant remained steadfast in his aim. It was a cold and bitter quiet as he held up the arquebus gun, without so much as a waver or a flinch. And then from the muzzle came a burning flash, followed by a crack like lightning. A plume of smoke billowed out next, wrapping the sergeant and his horse in a gunpowdery mist. The arquebus fired, loud and true. Bayard's sword fell first, ringing as it hit the pebbles below, and, coming to join it, the rogue's lifeless body fell too, and hit the ground with a horrible thud. The turning of the windmill threw its shadows over corpse and sword. Neither one would ever move against anyone again. Their violence was over. Marcel heaved short bursts of breath, bent over with his hands to his knees. The sergeant trotted a little closer until he was right below him.
"You all right, son?"
"Oui," said Marcel. He gasped. "I think I'm good."
"Well, come on down,"
said the sergeant.
"The sun's about to rise. We gotta catch up with the others."
The boy perked up.
"Monsieur René.
The commander. Is he okay?"
"He's all right,"
the sergeant laughed.
"I had just finally found him out there in the fog when he insisted we go looking for you. But I insisted he head for the ship while I circle back for a gander. And here you are. Now come along before it's too late. We got a ship to catch."
Marcel sped down the windmill without delay. With his feet back on solid ground, he walked out and found the sergeant off his saddle, crouching over Bayard's dead body. Marcel came near as a hot tear streamed down his cheek. The boy certainly wasn't crying out of any fondness for Bayard. No, it was out of pity. Pity that it had come to this, and had cost Bayard his life. As for the sergeant, it was not Bayard himself he was investigating, but rather it was something fallen beside. There was a shimmer of gold upon the gravel, catching the light between the shadows of windmill blades. A few gold coins had spilled out from the dead man's purse. Marcel snapped one for himself, but not out of greed. Just for a closer look as he rubbed his thumb over the coin's face. The gold was as cold as ice, and its shape was crude and unround. "You know what these are?" The sergeant flipped one through the air.
"They're escudos."
Marcel scratched his head. "What's an escudo?"
"Maybe you've heard of them before,"
said the sergeant.
"Only by another name. These are Spanish coins, and some people call them doubloons."
Marcel gaped at the coin in his hand. A Spanish doubloon?
"Quick, throw it in your pocket. Ribault will want to see one for himself."
The sergeant hurried back to his saddle, while the boy raced over to the cart's wreckage and retrieved his bow. The sergeant helped him clamber up to a spot behind him on his horse, and the pair rode off, racing against the sunrise.
Hi-ya!
As they made their way through the village, galloping for the port, Marcel caught sight of La Trinity's white sails, peeking above the rooftops.
"There!"
The sergeant slowed his horse. "What are you doing? The ship is just around the corner."
"Quietly now."
The sergeant held a finger to his lips.
"You hear that?"
There was a noise of clinking metal, and men throwing shouts back and forth. They trotted around the corner slowly and discovered the boiling mayhem of a battle taking place on the docks. There was Captain General Jean Ribault in gilded armor, fighting in splendor beside his men. Some of them had swords, others had pikes. Their chilled helmets bore the light of a new day's sun. Rivers of sweat leaked from their tarnished brows. All available strength, wherever it could be scraped up, had been mustered to hold a line against any knight of the road charging for the gangplank leading up to the ship. Ribault's line was full of seasoned men and young men, sailors and soldiers alike. To Marcel's envy, there was even a boy fighting too. He was a stocky, bull-necked youth, fending off the attackers with a fiery spirit. It was none other than Tristan himself. Marcel's stomach leaped with adrenaline. "Come on! What are we waiting for? We gotta help him!"
"You just keep your hot blood to a simmer for a second,"
said the sergeant.
"First, we gotta think this through."
He pointed to all the enemies standing between them and their friends. The enemy was indeed everywhere. While many knights contended with Ribault and his men out in the open, there were also hooded archers creeping along the rooftops, sending arrows from hidden nooks and crannies above.
"Riding out now would only attract every arrow straight for us, like getting caught in the rain with nowhere to run."
"Too bad none of them know Bayard's dead," said Marcel. "They'd probably give up if they knew."
"Not sure it'd make much of a difference. It's gold that drives these rogues, not Bayard. And I don't see a way through 'em that would get us to the ship in one piece. There's got to be at least 24 on the docks, half a dozen on the roof. They're not many, but these knights of the road put up a good fight."
"What if we charge him?" said Marcel. "You know, make a run for it head on."
A horse and I would probably make it, said the sergeant, but only 'cause your back would be full of arrows.
Marcel twisted his lip.
But that just gave me an idea,
said the sergeant.
See that last warehouse? The one by the ship? It's got a crane sticking out over the water. If we can swing it sideways, the end would be close enough to hop aboard, but we'll have to travel by rooftop, and we'll need a distraction. Fortunately for us, we've just got the thing.
The man gave his horse a hefty pat. The pair wasted no time in setting up their plan. Through the chaos of fighting, the sergeant's horse announced itself with a mighty neigh. He stood up on his hind legs, with an empty saddle, and the sheen of his hide sparkling in the dawn. He stomped to the wooden planks as a bull ready to charge. The steed took flight. Though he was riderless, he was not without aim. He galloped straight for the ship, brushing through the knights of the road. The archers up top held their fire, confused at the sight of a lone horse without a rider, charging into battle. Meanwhile, the sergeant and the boy hopped up a ladder and skipped across the gaps between the buildings. There they took the first archer by surprise. With the end of his arquebus, the sergeant sent a wallop to the face. The next archer thrashed his bow about like a club, and the sergeant parried back with the length of his gun. After a good hit or two, he left him for Marcel to finish off. The boy crouched low as the archer backed up, tripping him as the man stumbled toward the ledge. The rogue wagged his arms up and over, fighting for balance. Marcel sent the tip of his bow into the archer's chest. And away he went, plummeting through a canvas awning and crashing into a table and chairs below. One by one, Marcel and the sergeant took out each of the rogue archers. They sent them wailing off the roof and into sacks of barrels and piles of rope. Some even volunteered for a swim as they dove into the sea just to escape their wrath.
All right,
said the sergeant as they came upon the last roof.
This is it.
The warehouse rose with a pointed, tilted roof, a good deal steeper than all the rest of the shops and townhouses. It was no skip and a hop to reach it either. It'd be a great leap up just to grab hold of its gabled ledge. The sergeant went first. He bravely jumped forth and snatched a grip. As he pulled himself up, a knight of the road bearing a loaded crossbow peered over the ledge to greet him. Sergeant, watch out! Thump! The shot cleaned off a chunk of the sergeant's eyebrow and ripped off his helmet. Its metal clanked to the docks below, along with the flailing dart. With a scowl full of crimson, Marcel shot an arrow of his own. The tip and shaft tore a fleshy hole through the rogue's hand. The knight shrieked over in pain, giving the sergeant his opportunity. He seized the scoundrel by the arm and yanked him off the roof, all while holding onto the ledge with just the one hand, too. Marcel was convinced it was one of the greatest things he'd ever seen. The sergeant crawled up to the steep roof and found his footing.
Just like that, Marcel.
He reached out a hand to help the boy up.
Just like that.
Yeah, Marcel clenched his teeth as he looked down at the gap, at least 4 stories high. Nothing to it.
Come on,
said the sergeant.
Don't worry about falling short. Just give it your best try and I'll catch you.
As it were, the sergeant had an eye blinked shut to keep out the trickle of blood from his busted brow. The image didn't exactly instill confidence. Marcel gulped, making the sign of the cross for good measure, and leaped. The boy grasped the sergeant's hand as the man caught him, just as he said he would, and helped him up. In no time, Marcel had both feet on the roof. The boy grinned. Just like that, Sergeant?
Well,
the sergeant smiled.
Something like that.
He tugged down the boy's beanie, right over his face. Marcel might have wished it had stayed down, for as he pulled the beanie back up, the steep, unnerving heights of the warehouse were there to greet him. In a rush of immediate sweat, Marcel wobbled onto all fours and clutched the center ridge, where the 2 sloping sides of the roof came to a point.
The trick is to stand up straight,
said the sergeant.
The taller you stand, the better the balance.
That doesn't make much sense, said Marcel.
Just try it.
Marcel remembered the one-armed handstand in the old ruined church. That hadn't made much sense either. Yet it had worked. The boy trembled his way upright and took a deep breath. He could hardly believe it. He was standing tall and immovable upon the awkward angle of the roof's slant. The boy beamed a smile and followed the sergeant across the steep roof. At the crane, Marcel jumped first as it was a jump down, and he was actually starting to find these heights kind of fun. That was until the crane swung out in the wind and dipped. Marcel gave no pause along its narrow length, though his eyes tried to bulge out of its sockets. So, how are we going to get this thing to swing toward the ship? The sergeant crouched down and tried to wiggle the crane with just his own 2 hands and body weight. Surely there had to be some kind of give and take that could help swivel the crane toward the ship. But there wasn't so much as a budge.
It's stuck!
The sergeant looked up.
But there's a bit of rope hanging off there at the end. We could swing for it.
He judged the distance between the rope and the upper deck of the ship.
If we fall, it's just water below us anyway.
Marcel nodded, though he really wanted to shake his head no, and balanced his way to the rope dangling beneath the crane. So, Marcel reached the crane's end. How should we do this?
Here,
said the sergeant.
Switch me spots.
He sank down to the tip of the crane until it was more like a seat, with his legs at either side and the whole of the sea there in front of him. He pulled up a length of the rope about the size of a man, twined it between his legs, and grabbed hold.
Get on my back.
What?
Just do it.
Okay.
All right, hold on.
Whoa, whoa! The pair dove off, landing in midair as the rope's tension locked into place beneath the crane. The rope swayed back and forth, but the sergeant held tight.
We're too high,
said the sergeant.
We gotta get lower.
The man descended, inch by inch, with mostly his forearms doing all the work.
How you doing back there, Marcel?
Me? Feeling about as useless as a sack of potatoes.
Actually,
the sergeant grunted,
a sack of potatoes would be lighter.
He rested with a deep sigh.
Okay, I think we're low enough. The ship's deck looks about 15 feet away. When I say left, pull your body weight to the left. When I say right, same thing. No matter what, hold on tight until I give the order. Then jump for the ship. All right, left. Now right, good. Just a few more.
The rope went this way, then that, swinging wider and wider.
Last one, here we go.
The sergeant set himself free from the rope and plunged for La Trinity's upper deck. The sergeant and the boys smacked into the railing. Marcel caught a grip, but the man fell, splashing into the sea. Sergeant! He bobbed up from the tide, his blond beard sopping to his neck.
I'm all right. Keep moving.
Marcel mounted the railing and plopped over to the other side, all the while yelling, Man overboard! Man overboard! You know, there's a right way to board a ship and there's a wrong way. It was Captain Ribault, standing at the helm with hands to his hips. Marcel winced. Permission to come aboard, Captain? Granted. Ribault smiled through his great red beard. But next time, might I ask you use the gangplank like everybody else? But the battle! Oh. To his surprise, Marcel saw that the battle was over. Oui, Captain. What was left of the Knights of the Road had gone, and Ribault's men were all safely back on board. All that was left on the docks were gossiping villagers and the echo of church bells calling from up the alley. Marcel! You made it! It was René, coming up alongside as he tugged the boy in close. I'm so glad to see you're safe. But I don't suppose any of our gear made it aboard with you now, did it? Marcel hung his head. No, Commander. Just my bow. Oh, that's all right, said René. We're planning to stop down the coast in Le Havre anyway. I'll see to it we both get what we need before crossing to Florida. Merci, Commander. You're late, tested a young voice. It was Tristan. But welcome aboard. The boys embraced, followed by a mini boxing match until Tristan gave up early at the sound of a certain raspy voice.
Anybody seen my horse?
It was the sergeant, soaking wet and shivering beneath a wool blanket. Tristan ran up and slapped him a hug. Papa! Wait, said Marcel. He's your father? Tristan patted the man on the back. I told you he was a sergeant. Wait till you hear how he saved my life, said Marcel. Twice! You're so lucky you get to be his son. I wish I had a... Marcel couldn't say it out loud, but he thought it. A father. The sergeant swapped a concerned glance with his son, and then Tristan swung an arm around his best friend. I can't wait to hear the whole thing. But first, let me show you where the hammocks are. Yours is right next to mine. There's even a spot where you can stash your bow. Ah, you're going to love life aboard the Trinity, Marcel. And wait till I tell you all about the battle on the docks. Captain Ribault said we couldn't use the cannons this close to the village, so he ordered everybody to arms. And then we had to fight off those knights of the road hand to hand. I thought I did a pretty good job, too. And so the two boys hurried off, the one at the heels of the other. Into the depths of the hole they went, swapping stories of fresh wounds and everything else in between.